There is a moment, doctors have a name for it. They call it the threshold. It is the moment when the body has given everything it has. When the machines go quiet. When the family stops arguing about parking and starts holding hands. When a person crosses from the world of the living into something else entirely. Most people who reach that threshold never come back. But in the winter of 1986, in a small hospital room in rural Virginia, a man named Thomas Decker did come back. And what he brought back with him, the words he said, the things he described, the changes that followed, would shake his family, baffle his doctors, and for the rest of his life he would say only this: "I didn't see a light. I didn't see a tunnel. I heard a voice. And it knew my name." Welcome to the Universal Scripture, the channel where we journey through the most powerful, most mysterious, and most deeply human encounters with the divine, drawn from every faith tradition on earth. We don't preach. We don't debate. We simply tell the stories. Stories that have survived centuries because something in them refuses to die. Today's story is one of those. Stay with me, because by the time we reach the end, something will have shifted. Even if you can't explain why. To understand what happened to Thomas Decker, you have to understand who Thomas Decker was before it happened. He was not a religious man. Not even close. He was 54 years old, a retired electrician from Charlottesville, Virginia. Stubborn. Practical. The kind of man who fixed things with his hands and trusted nothing he couldn't see or measure. His wife, Margaret, had prayed for him every Sunday for 30 years. He had never once joined her. He drank too much. He smoked too much. He had the kind of relationship with his own body that suggested he believed he was indestructible, or perhaps that he simply didn't care. In October of 1986, Thomas felt a pressure in his chest that he described to his son as someone sitting on me. He ignored it for 11 days. 11 days. On the 12th day, Margaret found him on the kitchen floor. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. The paramedics worked on him in the driveway. His heart had stopped twice before they reached the hospital. The attending physician that night, a Dr. Raymond Holt, would later write in his notes 3 words that Thomas's family would carry with them forever. He wrote, "Not expected to survive." At 2:17 in the morning, Thomas Decker's heart stopped for the 3rd time. The room erupted. Nurses moved. A crash cart was pulled. Margaret was pushed into the hallway. His son Daniel, 26 years old, who had driven 4 hours through the night, stood against the wall and watched the door close in his face. Inside that room, for 4 minutes and 38 seconds, Thomas Decker was clinically dead. What happens next I want you to hear in Thomas's own words. These are taken from a recorded interview he gave to a journalist in 1991, 5 years after the event. He had never spoken publicly about it before. He said he waited 5 years because he needed to be sure he wasn't simply remembering a dream. He said, "There was no pain. That was the first thing. I had been in pain for hours, my chest, my arms, and then suddenly nothing. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you don't get in a house, or outside, or anywhere. A total quiet. I wasn't in the room anymore. I wasn't anywhere I recognized. There was no light, not the way people describe it. It was more like standing in a very still, very dark place. But not frightening. I want to be clear about that. There was no fear. None at all. Which for me was strange, because I was afraid of plenty of things in my life. And then I heard it. A voice. Not loud. Not from any direction I could point to. It was just present. The way a thought is present. And it said my name. Not Thomas. Not Tom. It said the name my mother called me when I was a boy. A name I hadn't heard in 40 years. A name nobody in that hospital knew. And I knew, in the way you know something when you're dreaming and it feels more real than being awake, I knew that whatever was speaking to me had known me my entire life. Every part of it. The parts one was proud of and the parts one wasn't. Thomas stopped the interview there. The journalist noted that he sat quietly for almost a full minute before continuing. When he did, his voice had changed. He said, "It told me it wasn't my time. And then it told me something else. Something I have never repeated to anyone. And I never will. But whatever it said, it was enough to change every single thing about the rest of my life." Thomas Decker's heart restarted at 2:22 a.m. Holt would describe it as spontaneous return of circulation, which in medical terms means, we don't know why it started again. It simply did. Thomas spent 11 days in intensive care. He was not supposed to have meaningful brain function. He had been without circulation for nearly 5 minutes. But when he woke on the third day, he looked at Margaret, and before she could say a single word, he said to her, "I know about the miscarriage. The one in 1967. I know you never told me. I know you've carried it alone for 20 years. I'm sorry I wasn't someone you felt you could tell." Margaret had never told a single person. Not her mother. Not her priest. Not her closest friend. Thomas Decker stopped drinking the day he left the hospital. He never had another cigarette. He began attending church with Margaret, not because anyone asked him to, but because, as he said, it felt dishonest not to. He spent the last 19 years of his life volunteering at a hospice, sitting with dying people. Not preaching to them. Not quoting scripture. Just sitting. Holding their hands. And when families would ask him why he spent so many hours in those rooms, he would smile and say, "Because I know that crossing isn't something to be afraid of. And someone should be there to remind them." Thomas Decker died in 2005. Peacefully, in his sleep, at the age of 73. Margaret was beside him. His son Daniel said that in the hours before he passed, his father was unusually calm. Almost joyful. Like a man who was not ending something, but returning somewhere. Thomas's story is not unique. And that, if you think about it, is perhaps the most extraordinary thing of all. Across every culture, every century, every faith tradition, accounts like his appear. The specific details shift. The voice becomes a light in one story, a figure in another, a warmth in another still. But certain elements recur with a consistency that has fascinated researchers, theologians, and skeptics alike. The absence of fear. The sense of being deeply known. The return with information that could not have been acquired. The permanent, irreversible transformation of character. In the Christian tradition, this mirrors the accounts of Paul on the road to Damascus, struck down, encountered by a presence, risen changed. In Islamic tradition, the night journey of the Prophet describes a crossing into a realm of divine encounter that reshaped the course of history. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Bardo Thodol, the Book of the Dead, describes in extraordinary detail the experiences of consciousness at the moment of transition, experiences that echo Thomas's with unsettling precision. What do we do with that? We are left, as we so often are at the edges of these stories, with a question that no laboratory and no argument has ever quite managed to close. What if the voice that knew Thomas's name has always known yours too? Whether you came to this story as a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, I hope it gave you something. A pause. A question. A moment of quiet in what is, for most of us, a very loud world. That is what these stories are for. They are not here to tell you what to believe. They are here to remind you that the questions, the deep ones, the ones you ask at 3 a.m. when the house is still, those questions have been asked by every human being who has ever lived. And sometimes, in the most unexpected places, something answers. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. And if you want to hear more, Stories from every faith, every tradition, every corner of the human encounter with the sacred. Subscribe. We have so many more to tell. Until next time, keep asking. Keep listening. And remember, you are never as alone as the silence suggests.